Hey, what do you know? I'm actually recording another one of these, and I might even have Pokemon bios in this one. Sorry. Schedule's been kind of shitty lately. Work has still been a lot better, because the bad management is gone, and I don't need to talk any more about that than I already have, but, I've only had like one day off, and I have tomorrow off, and then that's my only day off for that week, and yeah, so... Point is, I didn't have a whole lot of time to record this, but, here we go. So, because I have beaten a gym leader, I can be entrusted with a bottle of water, apparently. So we can go take care of that, but, before that happens, first, there is some stuff in the national park. I've, basically come to realize that this game, with its, time mechanics, is kind of dictating my schedule in a lot of cases. So, I'm specifically playing this in the daytime because I wanted to catch Nidoran and a couple other things. This and its female counterpart were both available on the previous route in Gold and Silver, but were moved to the National Park in Crystal for whatever reason, so they're both here, they're both common. And so is another Pokemon that I'm going to be catching. So we're going to go ahead and just talk about those a bit. I'll be combining Nidoran female and male into the same bio here, just because they're obviously related and they're similar enough to a point where I don't think I'd have enough distinct things to say about each separately. So I'll start out by first mentioning that yes, I am calling it Nidoran and not Nidoran. That is wrong, but it's just how I'm used to saying it after so many years, and I don't like saying it the correct way, kind of like how I do with Rattata versus Rattata. And with a lot of Pokemon, I'll try to base the way I pronounce it off of what words it's based on, but with this one that's a little harder because there's no, like, clear-cut meaning behind the name Nidoran. I usually try, when I go into this kind of stuff, I'll usually try to reword the Bulbapedia stuff or shorten it a bit, but here I'm just going to read it directly so you can hear everything that they have to say about this one. So, Nidoran may be derived from needle. It may also come from Nidocyte, a type of venomous cell responsible for the stings delivered by stinging animals, most notably jellyfish. Alternatively, it may be based on the Japanese word ni for two, or Nido for two times, referring to the two distinct evolutionary lines with similar names and traits. Also, the Japanese word ran is translated as orchid in English. Orchids are flowers that can be purple or blue, these being the same colors as the male and female evolutionary forms of Nidoran. So, some of that I feel like was kind of a stretch, but the Mandarin translation apparently does go off of the orchid thing also, so maybe that one is actually the basis. It's kind of... I would have not thought so, because that one seemed like they were really reaching, but who knows. But as with the name being kind of tenuous, I'm going to say that the animal basis for this one is pretty similar also, because I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be rabbits. Just in terms of body shape, the long ears, the buck teeth, and if we're going to be getting into weird, like, Japanese culture stuff, the fact that they evolved through the Moonstone eventually is also kind of, like, tied into the fact that they're rabbits, don't ask. I mean, aside from everything I just said, they really don't look that much like them. They're, like, covered in spikes and they're poisonous, which are not really things that rabbits are known for, so they're pretty much just kind of monsters, and I'm fine with that. I've said a few times that earlier Pokemon do tend to have a little bit more of a fantasy monster design rather than just taking a real-world animal and slightly tweaking it or making it, like, more anthropomorphized or cartoony. They don't really do that too much anymore, and just Nidoran's a good example of that. So, as for the whole gendered thing, a lot of this is just kind of stating the obvious, but they were the only Pokemon in Gen 1 to have specific genders like that, and I always thought it was weird that it was just part of the name. The fact that they are still named that is also kind of awkward. I've noticed that I don't know if this goes for all generations, but if you Basically, if you look at the way that their name is displayed, like in battle, usually the gender marker will be part of the name, and then they won't bother displaying it again where the gender marker would normally be for other Pokemon. But then if you give it a nickname, then it'll make the gender marker appear again. I guess they're just trying to prevent it being redundant. But, yeah, there's just kind of been a strange evolution of how they've treated this throughout the generations. Because first you had these, and then as of Gen 3, they introduced Volbeat and Loomis, which are basically the same idea, but they have different names instead of just the same name / male-female. And then in Gen 4 onwards, they started getting more into like the split evolution paths with Burmy and that kind of thing. And then like Gen 6, we have Meowstic, where the male and female are considered the same species, don't have different Pokedex numbers, but actually do have different like abilities and move pools and stuff. So there's really no consistency whatsoever. And then there's the whole thing with why can female Nidoran breed but its evolutions can't, but we'll, I guess, talk about that maybe later when I get to those. It's also worth noting that the female was always able to produce male eggs, but the male was only able to produce female eggs starting from Gen 5 onwards. If you bred a male Nidoran with a Ditto in Gen 2 through 4, it would always make a male offspring. So, and the same thing happened with Volbeat and Loomis, so I don't know, it's just kind of weird stuff. The pair is more based off of just sexual dimorphism, really, than anything else. I feel like that was kind of their main point in this one, rather than like, let's make a poisonous rabbit Pokemon. They're just like, let's make a Pokemon with male and female versions that do different stuff. And even that said, they're similar enough to where I don't really feel like we needed both, especially with all the poison types that already existed. Like, if we had just the Nidoking line, I don't think anybody would have really questioned that, because we already had stuff like Seaking, where the name kind of indicated one gender while it could be either. So, I don't know. Between the both of them, the female is the more defensive one, the male is the more offensive one. Just pick whichever you like better. I do like how they kind of swapped the colors opposite of the normal gender roles. But other than that, I mean, they've always just kind of been there, and I've not cared all that much about them. I've used each family, like, once. They were okay. They weren't anything fantastic. I do know that Nidoking can frickin' wreck face in Gen 1 just due to its ridiculous move pool that it gets through TMs, and the fact that it's something that you can get early on with a high base stat total. But, I don't know. It's just never something I've really cared about that much myself. Sunkern is a fairly simplistic grass type, so much so that I would actually argue that it's a more pure grass Pokemon than a lot of the stuff from Gen 1, and I'm not just talking about the fact that it's a pure grass type as opposed to having like a secondary type in there, though that is also part of it. A lot of the Gen 1 grass types were carnivorous plants, or poisonous, or generally unpleasant, or just kind of weird out there ideas. Whereas starting from this generation and a few of the games after this, we start getting into a lot more of the just kind of basic cutesy plants, Hoppet being another one of them. And here we basically just have a sunflower seed that is starting to sprout into a full sunflower, which you'll see in its evolution. And that's pretty much all it is. Again, I don't mind the design. Grass used to be my favorite type. It's still one of my favorites. And Sunkern's fairly cute and inoffensive, but it also doesn't really have a lot going for it, unfortunately. In terms of the design, like I said, it's pretty much just a sunflower seed. The little leaves on its head kind of make it look like it would be a, sort of like a helicopter, kind of like what Hoppet does, but it usually doesn't really do that. There's apparently some inconsistency with how it shows up in various media, where sometimes it just kind of hops around, sometimes it floats. But I don't think it's ever really supposed to be helicopter blades, which kind of a shame, because I guess that would kind of make it a little bit more interesting, but whatever. Name's also pretty straightforward. It's just Sun and Colonel, and then the Japanese name is Hima Nuts. Himawari being sunflower, and then just the word nuts. And there's also Natsu, which means summer. It could come from that. I guess really the thing that people remember most about Sunkern is the fact that up until Gen 7, it was the Pokemon with the lowest base stat total, and so it would fairly often be referred to as the weakest Pokemon ever, which I feel is a little bit unfair to it, because unlike stuff like Magikarp, Feebas, even Unknown, it does actually like get attacks that aren't horrible. They're still not amazing, but it has attacking power, whereas those don't. But in terms of like raw base stats, then yeah, it is actually the worst up until Wishy-Washy surpassed it in Gen 7. Because Sunkern is base 30 across the board with a total of 180. Wishy-Washy is a total of 175. Some stats being higher than 30, some being lower. But point is, it's really low down there, so I mean, you're going to probably want to evolve this thing as soon as possible, and given that it's a stone evolution, you won't have too much trouble getting that. And again, you can, especially since the stone that you get used to evolve it, the Sunstone, can be gotten from the National Park, which is where you catch this thing. If you do want to use one, you pretty much might as well just evolve it straight away, unless you want to raise it a bit to get some better moves, because stone evolutions typically don't really learn that many moves after they evolve. Sunflora kind of does, but there's a bit of an interesting case with those, and I'll probably talk about that when I talk about Sunflora. But I think that's about it for this one. I mean, what else is there to say about it? It's just a little plant creature. It's cute, but it doesn't do a whole lot. Okay, so, sorry, I had to probably insert some, like, nothingness there in order to fill time, because, even if I combine the two Nidorans into one entry, which I plan on doing, that's going to take longer than it took to get here. So, anyway, yeah, I can't really do anything until this thing's cleared out, so let's save just in case I botch this up. And to deal with this game's version of Snorlax. It is, I actually liked it better than Snorlax as Bab. I did use this one on my team back in the original Silver. But I think the general consensus is it's not really as good, unfortunately. So yeah, this is Sudowoodo, and it's the only one in the game, so we're definitely going to catch this thing here. I don't think this thing has a horrible catch rate, but I remember it being somewhat of a problem. Oh boy, and now I'm on a timer. So, probably a good chance I'm going to have to reset this here. Yeah, I think everybody pretty much knows what this thing's deal is, that it's a rock type that doesn't really look like one. I'll be talking about that in the bio, so I might as well just go ahead and cut to that right now and get it out of the way. Sudowoodo is a pretty cool Pokemon in my opinion, and I feel like it came out at basically the perfect time. Because in the early games, you have the overworld sprites for like the cuttable trees, which are fairly simplistic looking. And then you have the overworld sprite for Sudowoodo, which is different looking, but similar. And you can kind of see that it's sort of an imposter, and it works well given the minimalist graphical style. Whereas in later games, where they started getting a little bit more detailed, it wouldn't really work as well, because even though Sudowoodo is supposed to be imitating a tree, it really doesn't look that much like one. And I feel like that's sort of part of its appeal, actually, because you can't help but just love it for trying. Like, bless its heart, it isn't succeeding, but it's giving a solid attempt. I don't know, there's just something, I just enjoy its goofy-looking face and the fact that it doesn't really look like that much like a tree, but it's doing its best. So why is this thing a rock type? Bulbapedia says that it's probably based off of petrified wood, just a plant that becomes fossilized, and that is a possibility. That's probably what it's based on, honestly. I always just felt like they kind of picked a type that was as far away from grass as they could. They could have gone with like fire or something, but rock works pretty well because it is the correct color to be the brown tree or whatever. And in terms of like personality for it, They always say that, like, if you sprinkle water on the Sudowoodo, it'll, like, run away from you. It tries to run away from rain, that kind of stuff. And that makes sense with it being a rock type, because rock is weak to water, so it just worked out fairly well. Also, just quick note, this was the first pure rock type, because all the ones in Gen 1 all had a secondary type to them, most of them rock ground, but there were some half water and half flying in there. But, I don't know, there's just a lot going on with this one. I feel like, in future games, they're probably never going to be able to use it as a roadblock again, just because it wouldn't make all that much sense. Like, already just having the little bush in your path or the Snorlax in the road doesn't really make a whole lot of sense anyway, because it's like the insurmountable waist-high fence thing, like, just go around it. But, in this case, like, it's only 3 feet tall, it's fairly thin, there's no reason you couldn't just walk around it, and it doesn't look like a tree anyway, so it's like, just deal with it. Like, you don't need to go out of your way to get the squirt bottle or whatever. So, they probably won't use it as a roadblock again, but I do like what they did in Gen 6. You can encounter a horde of Trevenant in the forest, and then Sudowoodo just kind of appears alongside those, trying to fit in. And I just like how it doesn't really fit in at all, but it's trying. It tries to blend in with them and be part of the group, it just doesn't really succeed. Also, real quick here, I'd like to mention, I think this is the first Pokemon that I've covered that has a, like, evolutionary relative that wasn't in Gen 2. Because starting from Gen 4, we have the baby form Bonsly, which you get from breeding it with a rock incense. Bonsly doesn't really do a whole lot for it. It gets it access to fake tears, but whatever. But it's a fairly decent design on its own. And it's also kind of noteworthy that for some reason they also sort of made this thing into a counterpart for Mr. Mime. Mime Jr. and Bonsly both introduced at the same time, and they were like semi-version exclusives in Diamond and Pearl, and in Black and White. They're both mimics, but other than that, I don't really get why. Kind of weird. Okay, so hopefully I didn't go longer than 4 minutes on that one. That thing got in the ball much more easily than I thought it would. Before starting this video, I actually did buy a couple Great Balls just in case I needed them, but yeah, I managed to get it in only 2 Pokeballs, which is kind of surprising, especially now that I know that Burn doesn't actually increase catch rate in Gen 2. But anyway, as you may have seen there, I got the TM for Rock Smash from the dude over there, because in this generation it is a TM and not an HM, even though it is still used for, like, clearing out rocks, so I'm gonna have to teach this to something. I don't know what yet. I'll probably get, like, maybe like a Wooper, because I think it can learn, like, all the water TMs, or the water HMs, I can also give it this. But I'm not gonna bother with that right now. Delivered Kenya and got Nightmare. I didn't remember that that was the TM you got. I'm assuming nothing I have can learn this. Didn't think so. And so that leaves Route 37, which is just Route 36, but more so, except kind of not even that. So, and these are apricorn trees, I'm pretty sure. I haven't been picking these up just because I don't want them to clog up my inventory. At some point, I probably will want to get the different apricorn balls, just because they're kind of an interesting gimmick, but I kind of want to hold off on that. So, yeah, this is kind of a weird part of the game, just in terms of the way that the routes are divided up, because they're all so freaking close to each other. And, when I said earlier how the, Pokemon distribution was kind of changed around a bit, like the 2 Nidoran families moved into the National Park and all that, I had already talked about earlier how Route 36 used to not be available until after you got through Goldenrod, and so it had higher level Pokemon in Gold and Silver than it does in Crystal. And so that actually caused some shifts as well. What I didn't realize is that here on 37, the Pokemon available are actually pretty drastically different between the versions. There was basically like one thing I expected to catch here, and there's actually a lot of other crap. There's like 5 things here that I don't have yet. So clearly running into the same Pidgey over and over is exactly what I want to be doing right now. But no, I figure I'll try to get one of these, and then we're going to have to do a little bit of shenanigans to get the rest. And by that, I don't mean headbutting trees, because there are still a number of things I can get through that. I want to say 4. It's Execute, Pineco, Heracross, Apom, also Butterfree and Beedrill. I can get those from the bug catching contest, but they're probably easier through trees. So yeah, there's like... I just haven't been wanting to do it because it's... I don't think I've taught Headbutt to anything yet, and I don't have really enough money to buy another TM in case I want to have it, so I'm just kind of being lazy. I don't know. Also, it kind of gives me more Pokemon bios to insert into videos that probably already have enough as it is, so I'm just kind of waiting for like a dead period where there's not many new Pokemon to catch, and then I'll start throwing those in. But anyway, here's Pidgeotto. It's definitely a bird. So let's go ahead and snag this thing. And as soon as I get this, I'm going to explain what we're doing next, because it's something I was not really planning on doing in this playthrough, but due to scheduling issues, it's kind of become a necessity at this point. So yeah, we'll talk about that one in a bit. Let's go ahead and save. And you may be aware of this already, but I don't think it's a super well-known thing. There is actually a way to change the clock in this game. And I didn't want to do it because I felt like that was kind of lame, but screw that. I'm not waiting until, like, I can play this game after 6 to have access to nighttime Pokemon. So, just for the record, on Route 37, Pidgeotto is the only thing available in the day that I need. There is a morning exclusive, and then there's 3 night exclusives, so I'm going to actually be changing this to night. If you're playing Gold or Silver, I'm pretty sure it's just select down in B on the title screen, and it gives you this menu. In Crystal, they made it way more complicated to access for some reason. You hold down select in B, you let go of down in B but keep holding select, hold left and up, and then let go of select. And then you get this menu. And then you have to put in this mysterious password, which is basically... There is a formula for this, but I don't know it offhand. You have to convert your name into numbers, like every letter has a value assigned to it. And then you, like, divide that by 256, and then, like, add it to your ID number divided by 256, and then add that to your money divided by 256, or something like that. It's, like, something really stupid like that. So your name and ID number are always the same, but because your money is part of the equation, you have to actually look up your password every time your amount of money changes. But I made sure to not buy or buy anything or fight any trainers before doing this, so I should still have my correct password here from when I looked it up. Yep. So we're going to change this to be after 6 o'clock. Yeah, like I said, I kind of hate doing this, but it's not that big of a deal. It's not really cheating. So, it sure is nighttime now, and I have a feeling that one of the more common Pokemon is going to show up before I can really talk about Pidgeotto at all, so we're just going to kind of put that one on hold until I have a little bit more time to insert that one here. Because here's Stantler. And believe it or not, this is actually our new team member. I did not have this planned from the beginning, but I knew that if I had gotten Elekid from the egg, I wanted to use one of the generic overlooked normal types. And so it was basically between this one, Granbull, I think there might have been another one in there somewhere, and I kind of just decided to go with this one. So, we're using a Stantler. It could have been something cool like a Heracross, but no, it's this. I don't know, it might be kind of interesting. Probably not really. I don't know. We're gonna give it a shot. So, prepare for a whole bunch of Pokemon bios in a row. Let's do the Stantler one, then the Pidgeotto one, and then if I catch the other stuff, we'll throw those in there too. See you in like 6 days. Stantler is usually regarded as one of the most boring Pokemon designs ever. It's pretty much just a deer with like this weird hypnosis gimmick to it, and the design itself is fairly lackluster. It's a unevolving normal type with kind of mediocre to bad stats, and it's very easily overlooked. Johto is not in any shortage of single-stage, obscure Pokemon, and Stantler just kind of exemplifies that fact. But is it really worth the hate? And I'm going to say no. I've never really had much of an attachment to this thing, and I'm going to be giving it a shot in this playthrough, just because I want to see if it's worthwhile at all. But it actually has some interesting origins, believe it or not, beyond just being a deer. So, like I said, obviously it's a deer or a caribou or something. Bulbapedia says it's based off of a Sika deer specifically, and we'll get more into that in a minute. The name is just a combination of stare and antler. But where it starts getting interesting is the Japanese name Odoshishi. And before I explain what that means, let's get into a little bit of Japanese history here. Not really history, but just kind of like some trivia. So, as I've mentioned before, the Johto region is based off of a region in Japan, and Ecruteak City, which is just north of where you find Stantler, is based off of the real city of Nara. And Nara has a crap ton of deer in it. There's a legend that basically a god arrived in the city on a white deer to guard the Capitol building, and ever since then, deer have flocked to the area and have been considered like sacred heavenly animals. And apparently there's just like hundreds of the damn things everywhere. And so it actually makes sense that Stantler would be located near Ecruteak just based off of this fact alone, which is kind of neat. But then there's the concept of the deer scare. Those are called Shishi Odoshi, and there's very different types of these, but one of the most common ones is sort of like a hollow bamboo tube that fills with water and then kind of taps against a rock to make a little plonking noise. You'll see those in people's yards and gardens and stuff just to kind of scare off animals, because they'll come into the garden, they'll hear the noise, and they'll think that there's a predator there or something, so they'll go away. These are usually called deer scares, but they're used for other animals also. And so that, like I said, is called the Shishi Odoshi, and Stantler is Odoshishi, so it's just kind of an arrangement of the same syllables. It's not a deer being scared by things, it's a deer doing the scaring, because it's got these big weird antlers that look like eyeballs that can be used to alter reality and hypnotize and just generally unsettle the opponent. And its moveset does reflect this, because it gets hypnosis, and then it gets other stuff like Astonish, Glare, that kind of crap. Plus it gets the Intimidate ability. So it all just kind of ties back into that. And if you're wondering what this has to do with the bamboo tube thing, that's only one type of Shishi Odoshi. Another type is a balloon that looks like an eyeball that I'll definitely put a picture of one of these in because I've never seen them before. And that actually resembles Stantler's antlers fairly well. So it all just kind of ties together nicely. Whether or not this makes you appreciate the Pokemon anymore is entirely up to you, but I thought it was cool to learn that this thing isn't just a deer. It's just a shame that, as far as I'm concerned, it's the star of the Pokemon episode that swore me off the anime basically forever. The Little Bighorn, in which, or I think it's the Littlest Bighorn, where basically it's every single generic Johto episode, but to the power of 20, where they find the Pokemon of the day, it showcases its abilities, and then Team Rocket makes a ridiculous mech to catch this one Pokemon when they could just, catch it normally. And then that's the whole episode. There's a million others like that, but I remember just seeing that one and I'm like, okay, when are they going to do something else? And it just annoyed me. So, it has that going for it too. Hoodoo is the term that I've started using to refer to pigeons specifically. Also some other birds, but mostly just pigeons as of late. And it's a term that came around a couple of years ago due to a failed attempt at making a pigeon noise, where I basically just was like, and then Martin was like, and then I made fun of it for being really bad sounding, and then the name just kind of stuck. So, they've basically become my favorite animal recently, and I don't really have much of a good reason for this. They're common as dirt, and if you live in a city, they're all over the place, but I don't see them too terribly often, and when I do see them, they just kind of make me happy due to the way that they walk around, because I especially like the head bobs that they do. They're very goofy looking, and they just kind of make me laugh. Plus, I like the noises that they make. They're very calming and adorable sounding. So, the reason that hoodoos bob their heads is because, since their eyes are on the side of their head, they don't actually have very good depth perception. And so when they're walking, rather than just kind of keep it steady and have like a blurry view of what's going on, they'll kind of keep the head stable in one place and then jerk it together in one quick motion, just to kind of get a better judge of their surroundings and distance of things. And it's actually been shown that if you put a hoodoo on a treadmill, it will not bob its head because it doesn't have to update its position, and it can just kind of keep it still. So, hoodoos actually have a history with, like, being useful to people. Before they were considered pests, there were messenger pigeons used to deliver messages from basically one city to another, and the reason that they can do this is because they have a very good homing ability. They basically can dedicate a location to memory and go back to that location from anywhere. And so this was actually very useful in wartime. Some hoodoos have actually delivered important messages about various tactics and like information that would end up actually turning the tide in the war. And some have actually been given medals because of this. And they're also they were considered just generally good animals to keep around, and many people kept them as pets. Lately, they've just kind of been considered more of a pest because they're all over the place and they like poo on buildings and stuff and decrease property value. But I will always appreciate them, and as far as I'm concerned, having hoodoos in an area will make it more likely that I'll want to visit that area just to see them waddling around and being cute. Alright, I'm supposed to be talking about Pidgeotto. It's a bird. It's a bigger Pidgey. Its name doesn't really mean anything. It's not based off of a pigeon in any way. It looks more like a hawk or an osprey or something. And its Japanese name is just literally pigeon, which, again, it doesn't look like, so I don't know why they called it that, but whatever. Bulbapedia says that its name might be based off of the Italian word for 18, which is the level that Pidgey evolves at, but I feel like that's kind of a stretch. I mean, it could be. There's no other, like, plausible reason for the, like, Odo ending to its name, but whatever. And pretty much its only noteworthiness is the fact that it was the second Pokemon that Ash ever caught, and pretty much its only role in the show was to pop the Team Rocket balloon and not really do much else, and then it evolved and then he released it. So, yeah. Noctowl is the evolution of Hoot Hoot, and depending on how much of a fan you were of Hoot Hoot's design, might actually be somewhat of a letdown. For me personally, I usually don't ever really think of the first forms of Pokemon as being superior, just because my normal mindset is so ingrained into, like, I'll use the first form for as long as I have to, and then once it evolves, I'll be using that one for the rest of the game. So I'll kind of just get used to the final design, and usually just treat that as my opinion on the entire family. But I'm going to have to actually agree with the Bogleech write-up on this one, in that Noctowl is kind of a disappointment, because Hoot Hoot had this whole clock motif going on. It was fairly gimmicky and an interesting take on an owl, whereas this one's just pretty much a regular owl with, like, some stylistic changes, but nothing too major. It's pretty much based off of the Great Horned Owl. Like, obviously it's not just a one-to-one conversion, but it's very similar. And as with many other Pokemon, the name is straightforward. It's just nocturnal and owl. Japanese name is Yoru no Zuku, which Yoru means night and Mimizuku means horned owl. So I guess straightforward on that one too. But yeah, this one's just kind of your nighttime equivalent to Pidgeotto or Pidgeot or Fearow, kind of a bit of all those. I mentioned before how with Spearow and Pidgey, you kind of had your choice of like, do you get the common one that takes a while to evolve, or do you get the slightly rarer one that's kind of better to have in the long run? Because Spearow evolves at 20, Pidgey evolves once at 18, and then again at 36. Hoot Hoot follows the Spearow pattern where it only has one evolution and it hits it at 20, so you can get Noctowl fairly early on. And I'd argue that it's more useful than Pidgeot just because it has access to like Hypnosis, Confuse Ray, that kind of stuff. It's sort of like an honorary psychic type without actually being one, sort of like Stantler. So, I don't know, it's worth a shot if you want to use an early route bird, but obviously it's nothing too spectacular. And its most notable, like, role, I guess, is the fact that Ash had one in the show, and it was a shiny. But they never really did a whole lot with that, from what I understand. He got it around the point that I stopped really watching the show, so I don't know this personally, but from what I understand, he used it against Morty, making use of the Foresight, allowing you to hit ghosts with normal-type moves thing. But then after that, it just kind of really didn't do much. Kind of like the rest of his Johto team, from what I understand, because he had all the starters and they never fully evolved and they were all just kind of lame. He later on got a Phanpy that was sort of the same way, and then he had this thing. So, not really his all-star team by any means. And I suppose they probably just made Noctowl shiny to make it kind of a little bit more interesting, because Pidgeotto never did anything, so they're like, well, we'll at least give this one a gimmick. They also made it really small for some reason. Noctowl was actually like 5 feet tall, and his was about like 2 feet. And they did point this out in the show, saying like it was special for that reason also, but couldn't really tell you why, other than just to make it fit in with the rest of his unevolved team, I guess. So, I don't know. It's kind of unimpressive, but it's solid enough for what it is. Yet again, a Pokemon that I don't really know how to pronounce, or intentionally pronounce the wrong way. Ariados, except I think it's supposed to be like Ariados or Ariados. I don't know, I'm just gonna call it Ariados. It's the evolution of Spinarak, and it is definitely a spider of some description, but it's a weird one. The closest thing that it seems to resemble is the ant mimic spider, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a spider that looks like an ant and walks like one. I didn't bother really doing any research on that one, so I'm not sure why it does that. I assume to confuse its prey or something, I don't know. But point is, this one is kind of like that in the sense that it doesn't really look that much like a spider. It really only has 4 legs. It has 2 extra ones that kind of stick out of the back of its body and point upwards, which I always thought was really weird. Apparently it can use those as stingers, I guess kind of like a scorpion. And its Pokedex always mentions that it can basically make webbing from both ends of its body. So its gimmick is supposed to be that it kind of like functions like in both directions, and like its backside is supposed to confuse it like enemies and make it look like a second head, even though it really doesn't. It kind of has like this doofy like bunny rabbit with a conical mouth kind of look to it. I don't know, it's weird. But it also has a very garish color design, which works for a poison type, even though spiders don't usually do that. Other poisonous animals sometimes do. And it's it would fit better with Spinarak if Spinarak had kept the weird purple coloration that it had in the original Gold Silver sprites. Instead of just turning from bright green into this, that would have flowed a little bit better, but I'm fine with Spinarak as it is, so whatever. Name on this one is pretty hard to pinpoint. It's the same in English and Japanese, and so a lot of the names that are like that, I would just kind of tend to not question them. I do that with a lot of the legendaries and stuff like that. I just never really bother looking up what they mean. And this one I assumed was just based off of some Japanese terminology, but the most likely scenario seems to be that it's actually named after Ariadne from Greek mythology. She's the one who, I'm probably going to botch this name, gave Theseus a ball of twine when he went into the labyrinth to fight the Minotaur. So, like, because this thing can create webbing or whatever, it's vaguely related, we'll give it that. The dose is possibly from the Japanese word odosu, which means to threaten. I'm actually surprised that Bulbapedia mentions that it could also be Spanish for two, because it's a second evolution, because whenever I hear anybody mention that for Gyarados, I think that they're just trying to fit something in that doesn't really work, but they actually do mention that, which is kind of weird. It could refer to the fact that it is, like, has two heads, though, so that one I can kind of buy. But yeah, I've never used one. I might at some point. I mean, it's okay-ish. It's definitely not the worst early route bug type, but it's a pretty bad pool of Pokemon to be one of the better ones of. So even then, it's not all that impressive. So, I don't know. Use it if you want to. I will probably pass. Ledian is our evolution of Lediba, and it is one of the worst fully evolved Pokemon out there. Just getting that right out the bat. It's something I did actually try to use once, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I will point out, just because there's one person who's been wanting me to mention this for ages, that it does have a better special attack than physical attack. It's still not great, but it's 55 as opposed to 35. And so in Gen 2, it can actually make decent use of the elemental punch attacks and not be horrible. But that's about all it can do. It has decent special defense, and it has various support moves, and it can baton pass, but you're not going to want to use this thing competitively, and in-game, it's not going to do a lot for you because its attack power is extremely bad. The Pokedex even actually references this in one of the Dex entries by saying that basically its individual punches are, it actually uses the term piddly. Its individual punches are piddly, but it does them quickly, so it tries to win through quantity rather than quality. I just think that's kind of hilarious. Because when they gave it a hidden ability in Gen 5, they actually gave it Iron Fist, the ability for Hitmonchan, which raises the power of punching attacks, but they're already so bad that it's not really going to do much for it. Plus it's bug flying type, which does nothing any favors pretty much, except for like Mega Pinsir and maybe Yanmega, but even then that typing's kind of a detriment. But anyway, like I said, it's a Lediba evolution, and it is just kind of Lediba, but more so. The Pokedex entries always mention stuff about it being like related to space and stardust and stuff, but it doesn't really do anything with that. It doesn't have any attacks that make use of it other than Swift. If the Cosmic type existed, they could give it to this, and it might make it stand out a little bit more, but it would also need like some severe buffs to go along with that. But yeah, as for the name, I mean, it's also the same in Japanese and English, other than it became Ledian instead of Redian. It's pretty much just Lediba, but now it's a man, I guess. I don't really know. And it seems to have sort of a, like, Super Sentai hero thing going on with it. Now, I've never really watched any of those, so I can't speak from experience, but I know that there's a lot of shows like that out there. Like Power Rangers is based off of one of them, and then there's like the Kamen Rider type stuff. And it does kind of have like the helmet look to it, like it could be a superhero. Which is not a bad idea for a Pokemon design. I'd be on board with that. I just wish it was better. Like that I'm repeating that so much in this bio because that's really all I can say is when I see this thing, I just think wasted potential. Like, you have your early route bugs that are kind of meant to not be great, but this one is just... They made something worse than Butterfree, and I'm not really sure how they managed that. It's basically Butterfree, but without the powder moves or the psychic attacks or anything that made it good. I'm sorry, Lydian. I hope you get a buff one day. Okay, so that went a little bit more smoothly than expected. I did not expect to actually encounter the Ariados so quickly, or the Ledian for that matter, because I wasn't even planning on getting the Ledian at first, but I figured I might as well go for it while I know my password. So yeah, that's all out of the way then. Just in case you tuned out during all that and weren't paying attention to what I was doing, named the Stantler James just after James Potter, because he's a stag. Well, his Animagus form is, whatever. Moveset a little bit lacking at the moment, to, like, put it mildly. I think I'm going to be teaching it some TMs, pretty shortly here, but, let's actually just do a, like, proper trainer battle for once in this video. Well, there's going to be more after this, but I don't know, I feel like this has been 40 minutes of more or less nothing happening. I mean, I got a new team member, I got past the Pseudo Widow, I caught some stuff. It wasn't nothing, it just wasn't anything like... I don't know. I was gonna say nothing interesting, but that's not true. It's not like fighting a random trainer-owned Jigglypuff qualifies as interesting. But yeah, I was trying to get up to level 15 off of wild Pokemon, but they weren't having it. Because 15, I believe we get a new move. Yes, we do. That'll be very useful for catching stuff and just in general. Let's immediately test it out so that it can miss. Yup. 60% accuracy. 60% accuracy. 60% accuracy. 60% accuracy. We're gonna do this all day. What was that, the 5th time? And the thing is, I'm still encored into it, so... Okay, no, I'm not. Yeah, that was... Jesus Christ. So, fun fact about Hypnosis, they actually boosted the accuracy of that move up to 70 for Diamond and Pearl, and then immediately regretted their decision and brought it back down to 60 for Platinum onward, so it didn't even make it through a whole generation. I guess they just thought it was too broken that way, I don't know. It's amazing what a 10-point difference can do. So anyway, now that we actually have Hypnosis, I'm feeling like that Nightmare TM that I just picked up might actually be something interesting to use. It's, yeah, it's not like a direct attack, it causes kind of residual damage, but a fairly good amount of it. So if I don't have the misfortune of missing 5 times in a row constantly, I might actually be able to make some use out of that. Also, I might just give it Mud Slap, because I looked over this thing's moveset and holy crap is it anemic. So, we'll do that when I get to that critique. I'll try to show you how scary that is, but 60% accuracy. What do you have, Drowsy? Yeah. I think Drowsy normally has Insomnia in generations with abilities. I actually don't remember. I'm really bad at remembering abilities. So I would not be able to do this if this was a later game. But yeah. Screw you, your tactics do not work on the likes of me. I was gonna say I think Stantler has Insomnia too, but that's not true, it gets Intimidate. I wish it had Intimidate in this. That would be helpful and make it stand out slightly more. Haha, the 60% accuracy has come to bite you now. Now I'm the one on top. I don't know. I should probably turn attack animations back on. If I can, like, remember how to navigate a menu. Also, this is, along with the patch on Route 7 in Kanto, this always reminds me of an American flag. Just the way that it has, like, the patch in the top left. I don't know, it just looks like one to me. So, let's do a little bit of wandering here. Ekritique is kind of the, like, lore hub of the world. Basically all the legendaries of Johto are linked back to this town in some regard, except for Celebi, I guess. I like the, like, traditional Japanese-sounding music, too. It's a nice place. The layout of the town is fairly generic. It's just kind of your normal town, but it has an interesting backstory to it. So, there's a few things we can do here, actually. Despite just saying that I like this town, I'm going to, now immediately go back on my word and say that I kind of hate the fact that it's here, or at least the way that they handled it, because, if we take a look at the town map real quick, I have options here. I can go left or right, and the game actually, I don't think, cares which way I go yet. I'm pretty sure I can go left without anything blocking me. I'm gonna actually check if I can go right. I don't think there's anything that would prevent me from doing that. So it's like, there's a gym here, there's a bunch of stuff I have to do. Or can do, rather. But, yeah, if you go this way, it's like you get stopped by water, but you can cut through Mount Mortar to bypass it. So even if you don't bother getting surf yet, you can still go this way. So you can kind of do a lot of stuff out of order, and because of this, the level curve is just completely botched. There's just no recovering from it. Like, from this point on, you will be lucky to ever encounter anything above level 20. Up until, like, the 7th gym. It's pretty good. So, and also, that might be a slight exaggeration, but it's pretty bad. And so, because I have different options, also, Bill talking about the time capsule here, usually this is something completely, like something I can completely ignore, because I would never make use of it, but, in this playthrough I actually am going to be trading, so that'll be, something I'll have to use later on. I like how you have to actually wait an extra day. It's a little weird. So yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going to... so cool. So good! I'm not sure when I'm going to be trading over old stuff. Probably just during periods where there's not a whole lot going on. When I don't have other Pokemon that I'm catching. But yeah, in terms of stuff I want to do in what order... Like... I'll clear out this town first, because there's no reason for me not to, really. But, I'm trying to think, in terms of, like, my team, a major thing that's going to be coming up, I usually kind of, like, don't like to mention this stuff just because I like it to sort of be a surprise when it comes up, but I'm going to mention that, I can get a Metal Coat to evolve David into a Steelix, off of a Magnemite to the left of the city, if I, like, get lucky with it having a held item, so I'm probably going to have to, either reset a bunch when I catch it, or just catch a bunch of them, which I don't want to do because I don't have that much money. So that'll be cool. I'll want to do that sooner rather than later, because I think Steelix actually does learn moves, which Onyx very much does not. At least moves worth a damn. Plus it has the stat boost, and it's just generally good to have. And then, as far as adding new team members, there's a couple that I won't be able to get for quite a while still, but my 4th is going to be available pretty soon. And I'm not going to tell you yet if it's to the left or to the right or what it is, but we'll see it when we get there. But yeah, I think like, you're intended to go left first, at least according to like the list of badges here, because it shows Chuck, then Jasmine, then Price. So that's like the intended way to go, but there's nothing really stopping you from going the other way. And whenever I play through these games, I always am like, okay, do I want to do it the normal way, or do I want to mix it up? And I think I've actually been mixing it up more often than not lately. Like, the last few times I've played this, so... I'm probably just gonna go left, because the Magnemites are there, and that's what I need. I don't know. If, I was gonna say if people want me to go right, I'll go right, but screw that, I'm just gonna do what I want. I already talked to you. I don't know why I'm going around talking to everybody. So this is the dance hall. Here, if we fight all the evolutions, we get Surf. That is very much something I would like to do, but I'm going to hold off on that because they actually are fairly high leveled, from what I remember. At least, like, compared to my current team. So, instead, let's get bodied by Yusin. I think he's in here. I don't even remember. Or actually, instead of doing that, let's do what I said I was going to do and use the TMs. But wait, let's not get too hasty here. Let's clone some TMs. Because, you know, I'm totally gonna need the Mud Slap and Nightmare TMs for other stuff. Okay, actually, here, let me... Yeah, put you away for right now. I need to have something that I don't care about. I mean, I kind of care about everything that I have, but, like, I can catch some of this later on if I need it, so whatever, we'll take the Oddish for right now. No. The reason I always switch to box 14 is because I heard that you can corrupt a box by doing the trick wrong. I still don't know if that's true, but I don't want to really risk it. So, let's see, I want to save with it in my party. Right? I'm trying to think how you normally do this. Because, how'd... Sorry, I had like a brain aneurysm there. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is how I want to do it. Let's test it with a useless item just to make sure. So give it I'll give it a berry. I like how I consider the potion too valuable. Because I've done cloning before with like the odd egg and stuff, and I've never tried it with this. So I just want to make sure I'm doing the correct thing here. I think we want to save while it's holding the item actually, because we want the game to remember the team and the PC, and it just depends on when you do it. So we do that, put it in the PC, then we do change box, change to something else, move away from the microphone because I have to turn off the GameCube. And then we find out if I did it right. If that worked, then I can do that for the 2 TMs, and then we don't have to worry about losing them. I won't subject you to watching it, because this video is already full of a bunch of useless crap. So, let's see. Also, it's like 80 goddamn degrees in here, but if I turn on the air conditioning, it will be loud and people will hate it. So I'm probably not going to record for that much longer. Okay, so that did work. I'm just going to go ahead and release the extra one because I don't need it. I can actually clone multiple items at once, but I'm just going to play it safe and do them one at a time, so I'll be back when I have both of the TMs. Okay, well that took entirely too freaking long, but I duplicated both of the TMs. those super valuable TMs that I'll definitely use again in the future. I just don't like using unique items. So yeah, I don't know if I'm like even ever gonna use Mud Slap, but it's sure as hell not gonna learn anything better naturally. Trust me, I looked up this thing's moveset, it gets jack shit. So we're getting rid of Leer, because, I mean, Leer is not the worst move, but I mean, it's Leer, so whatever. So basically this thing now has one direct attacking move, which is just Tackle, and a bunch of support moves, which is pretty appropriate for Gen 2 from what I've heard of the metagame, but in-game it's going to be slightly tedious to use. Oh well, we'll deal with it. So like I said, let's get wrecked by the trainer battle in here after I unnecessarily save, because I've done so much since the last save. I don't know. Burn Tower is a bit different since Gold and Silver, because in those games it just kind of was a regular looking tower, and in Crystal they actually made it look like it has some damage. And then they just... I was gonna say they changed the name in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, but they didn't. They changed the Tin Tower to the Bell Tower, I think. Or something. I don't know what they did. They did something weird. It's not particularly hard. Oh, does he not battle me here? Alright then, never mind. Preparing for nothing. There is a rival battle, though. Morty, what are you doing here? Don't you have... Well, I mean, I was gonna say don't you have better things to do, but that would just involve standing in one place in your gym, so never mind. And here is where having Rock Smash would be handy. I don't know what that item is, but I'll want to get it eventually. Could also clone the Rock Smash TM. I'm pretty sure I can get multiples of that one anyway, just from buying it somewhere, but I don't remember where you do that. Who texted me? Why are you doing this? So yeah, there's a couple new Pokemon in the tower. I think I'm going to catch at least one of them. But I figure we'll probably do the rival battle first, unless it shows up in the next few steps here. I'm assuming he still has the same 3 Pokemon from before, which means that Tackle is not going to be doing any good against the Ghastly. I love how he just gets upset over nothing and then blames it on me, even though there's... no, he did get something new. Trying to think what it is. I guess we'll find out in a second here. Well, I see his Ghastly evolved. Prematurely. How did you do that? Let's, oh yeah, actually Mud Slap will be super effective, never mind. Let's try to Nightmare this thing. After it takes out half of its own health, so Nightmare will kill it in 2 turns, and I'll still die in, like, 4 anyway, so... This is just kind of a battle of ongoing damage. It's a good battle. Also, because he's in the green now, I'm guessing he's not actually going to die in 2 turns to this. He probably has a HP that does not end in a good number. Also, that Nightmare did nothing. Okay. So it actually takes an extra turn to go into it. God damn. That takes a while to do anything. And I assume if it wakes up on this next turn, it's not going to take damage, so... Ugh. That's, I can see that being helpful against Pokemon that are bulky, and I'm having to, like, slowly whittle them down. But yeah, that's... a little disappointing. Also, did I stop taking curse damage? Alright. You are actually 4 times weak to ground, so my Piddly Mud Slap might actually... Oh, I only have 1 left because he spited it. That's lame. At least I got a critical out of it. And yeah, I'm still taking curse damage. And dead from Sonic Boom. Oh well. That's what I get for experimenting and trying out stuff that I don't think is going to work. We're going to make James work somehow. I don't know how yet, but it's going to happen. I know it can also learn Dream Eater. I don't know where you get that TM, though. I'll have to look it up. It's probably the dude in Viridian City. I know that's where it is in Gen 1, at least. What starter does he have in this reality again? I never remember. So I think the 3rd starter that I got was Chikorita, so he should have Quilava? You'd think I'd remember this, because I've battled him a few times now. Overly dramatic confused ray animation, yeah! Also, this entire episode, I've been waiting for, like, a moment when I had nothing better to talk about, where I would mention that, for the first time in months, I've actually, like, touched Ultra Sun. And finally caught a wild Snorlax, which was the thing that was, like, putting me off from playing it. Because I couldn't... Like, I found one and accidentally killed it, and then could not find another one, and it was pissing me off. So, I finally got one. I'm still not out of the trying to catch random shit that shows up rarely from SOS battles stage. I'm just gonna keep doing that until my, Geodude is at the same level as the rest of my team, which is like 32, I think. But, perhaps one day I'll stream that game again. At this point, I kind of just want to play through it on my own and not stream it, but I don't know, we'll see how I feel. My problem with the newer Pokemon games is I have too many random self-imposed rules that I follow, and they kind of slow down the process quite a bit. And here's one of my favorite bits of dialogue in the entire game. Not this right here, but after the battle's over. Good. He's such an asshole. For no reason. Alright, so let's say hello to our friendos. And 2 of them are like, doop de doop de doop, wander off, and this one's like, hey, I'm on the title screen, I'm special, I'm gonna do a little dance, ho 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 ho. And then wanders off, and it's like, have fun not finding me until Kanto. But yeah. I think it doesn't show up until Kanto, I don't even remember. At least you're guaranteed to find it, unlike the other 2. Roamers are something that I've not hated as much as other people. Like, from what I've seen with just forum posts, like, people fucking hate roaming legendaries, and I can understand why. Because they are annoying, but at least in later games, there's ways to deal with them. In this game, it's... You have Mean Look, but, I mean... They're still gonna use Roar. So yeah, you pretty much just encounter it, throw a ball, and hope, but, I mean, we'll worry about that when it comes up. For right now, here's a Coughing. This is the one Pokemon in Burn Tower that is actually easy to encounter. The other ones are kind of rare. Because for some reason, Magmar isn't here. It is in Gold and Silver. Crystal, they moved it to the post-game. And by post-game, I mean Mount Silver. It's literally the last area of the game. I guess because you can get a Magby from the egg, but... I mean... I feel like that's probably not the reason they did it. I don't know. It's... Especially since the egg was, like, tied to an event in the Japanese version. But anyway, let's talk about Coughing for a bit. Coughing is a pretty cool guy. I have to say that my appreciation for it pretty much comes from the website Pokemopolis, which incidentally is due to probably go down later this year, so I hope somebody's archived most of their material. But it was their favorite Pokemon just due to its constantly happy expression and carefree look on life. And it seems to be fairly popular as a mascot because it's also, its German name is Smogon, which was obviously taken by the competitive battling site, Smogon.com. And there's also a lesser-known site called Dogasu's Backpack that goes over the Japanese anime and differences between it and the English version. And Dogasu, or Dogars, is its Japanese name. Incidentally, Dogars is also something shouted out in Roxy's gym in Black and White 2, kind of hilariously, but then they just changed it to be yelling Pokemon instead in other versions, which is kind of lame. But yeah, coughing's kind of weird. It's one of 4 million poison types in Gen 1, but it's arguably kind of like the most standout one of the bunch. It's the air pollution mascot, well, maybe not mascot, but like the air pollution equivalent to Grimer, which is like the water pollution, and then many generations later it would get Trubbish, which is the land pollution. So why it's based off of like an aquatic mine in terms of looks, I couldn't really tell you. I don't know if that's specifically what they were going for, but it definitely does look like one. But no, it's just kind of a weird balloon asteroid thing that emits toxic gas, but is extremely happy while doing so. And a couple interesting things about its design. It has the skull and crossbones below its eyes in pretty much every single appearance, but in the red and blue sprite, it's actually like the opposite, where the skull crossbones is above its eyes. And that wasn't actually the original sprite, because that came out after Japanese red-green, where it looked more or less normal. So I think they did that intentionally, just to kind of make it look like not all of them were exactly the same, which would make sense because it's a creature born from like pollution and mutation, so not all of them would look identical. But they never really stuck with that, and they've always looked the same since then. And another thing about some of its early appearances, in like the original red-green sprite and some of the early artwork, you would actually see the smoke that it forms actually comes into the shape of hands. And that would have been an interesting idea to play with, kind of having the disembodied hands like Haunter does. But sadly, that's not really shown up again either. But yeah, name on this one, again, pretty straightforward. It's just coughing, but spelled weird. The beta name was just Nye, NY for New York. And Weezing's name is La for LA, Los Angeles. Just because they're big cities with pollution, so I don't know, it was kind of a stupid idea to name them after that, but I guess it's kind of funny in a way. I'm glad they didn't stick with it, though. And, yeah, pretty much everybody just knows coughing for being James's signature Pokemon up until, well, I mean, he had Weezing for a long time. The coughing didn't stick around that long, unfortunately. Coughing definitely was a lot more pleasant to keep around, and it's a shame it didn't last that long. So, I've tried using it a couple times. It's okay. It's more of a defensive beast than an attacker, which also fits with its role in the show of pretty much just existing to put up a smokescreen and then that's it. But it's a solid choice if you can wait long enough in the game to get one, because they're usually pretty late. And just like that, as if I timed it, which, trust me, I didn't, we find one of the other new things just as the other bio ends, theoretically. So that worked out. It's Eradicate, it's nothing exciting, but it is something new, so we'll catch it, we'll talk about it, and if I happen to find the other new thing, which is a 1% encounter rate, then we'll get that, but if not, then I think we're probably going to end pretty much right after this, so here's Eradicate. Eradicate's a big, ugly piece of crap. It never really was one of my favorites, gotta say that much. For a evolution of, like, an early rodent, I mean, I guess it's okay. Rattata itself never really impressed me all that much, so Makes sense that Raticate never did, especially since this one's just more of the generic, like, brown mammal thing that we saw a lot of in Gen 1. Rattata at least was purple, which made it slightly more unique. But anyway, its only real claim to fame is the fact that it got Super Fang. Hyper Fang also, but that was more of a generic move. Super Fang being the move that can basically do 50% of the opponent's health in one hit, which is fairly useful. But then that started appearing on other Pokemon later on in other gens, so it's not unique to Raticate anymore, so yeah, it's whatever. This one is actually not just based on a rat, it's based off of something called the Nutria, which is just specifically a large rodent that is semi-aquatic, and Raticate is not really known for being aquatic in any way, but its Pokedex entries do usually mention that it's a good swimmer, even though it's usually not found in, like, water areas, so I don't know why they always draw attention to that, but there you go. But yeah, it looks like one of those, and sure, that's what it is, I guess, or it's just a big ugly rat, whatever. Japanese name of this one is just Rata, so that one's pretty good. English name of this one is fairly obvious now, it's just Eradicate, and it's a rat, so it works out well, but I have to admit, it actually took me far too long to get this one. I think I had first heard the word Eradicate, or, like, I might have heard it beforehand, but never paid attention to it. I think I made the mental connection when I was in, like, junior high, which was several years after the games had come out, so I don't know, it was just, for some reason I remember hearing that one, making the connection, thinking I was clever for realizing it, and then realizing that I wasn't clever at all, and I should have realized it years ago. But it also led me down the path of thinking that if you don't specifically know words like that, then I'm not sure, like, how you would realize that it's a pun in the first place, but I mean, I guess that's kind of the point. I don't know, I'm just rambling right now. But yeah, it's a Pokemon that shows up far too often. For some reason, Butch and Cassidy had one as, like, their mascot, but it didn't do anything interesting like Meowth did, so it showed up a couple times, and that was it. Ash owned one for about 5 seconds when he traded his Butterfree for one on the SSN, and then decided he needed to trade it back while the ship was sinking. So he's gonna basically risk his life to get his Butterfree back, and it's impossible to just hand a Pokeball over. You have to put it into the specific trading machine, or otherwise you'll get arrested by the Pokemon police or some shit, so I don't know. I always thought that was really dumb, but he made a good decision because Butterfree is better. Yeah, that's about all I got on this one. Did you see that shit? How many Pokeballs did that thing break out of? Like, good fucking god. So, if I don't find it on this encounter, I'm done. Didn't think so. I probably didn't even have enough Pokeballs to catch it anyway. So, we'll get the other thing that's down here at some point. It's, you know, there's no point in me even like, I have this tendency to, like, keep things a mystery for no reason. Like, oh, I don't want to say what the wild Pokemon is, it'll have to be a surprise, when people probably either already know, or don't care, or could look it up if they cared, which they don't. So it's a Weezing. 1% chance of finding it. It's not there in Gold and Silver, it's just there in Crystal. I don't know why it's there. I wish it wasn't, because the fact that it's there means I basically have to get it now, but we'll get it at some point. For right now, we're gonna stop, and next time I guess we're gonna fight the Dancing Eevee Sisters, or whatever, the Kimono... Why did I call them? Kimono Girls, whatever we call them. Fight those, and then probably go off and find some, like, pancakes or something.